Hey everyone, hope everything is going well. Today we have a returning guest. He is one of my favorites, Ryan McClanahan. What's going on, man?
Same old different day. There's quite a bit actually when you're in the hobby.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I see you have a new mic, so now we'll hear you loud and well.
Yeah,
Yep. So, have you purchased anything the last time since we spoke live?
yeah. I did actually. Nothing too outrageous. Let's see. I purchased this a Dan Hampton rookie autograph,
Okay.
and let's see what else.
Dan Hampton from the Bears.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Okay.
it's a card I've always wanted to add to my collection. It's not that difficult, and then I picked this up as well.
Montana.
Yeah.
Montana. Okay.
And yeah, it was a show this weekend actually. I gotta tell you, I was really kind of taken aback at the things that because I don't go to too many shows, so I was really shocked at a lot of the stuff that I was seeing there, a lot of the modern stuff, and I'm really kind of old school, so I won't Kevin Durant. I'm not entirely familiar with him, so I probably won't be buying any of his cards.
So you said you were taken aback from the show. What do you mean that you just saw way too much modern and you're more of a vintage guy? Is that what you're saying?
Um, I am used to I am used to seeing modern stuff, but it was so much autographs. It was, like Joe Burrow was all over the place, which I in fact, I had just bought a Joe Burrow Panini card, and it's the first time I've bought an active player since 1994.
Oh.
Yeah, a long time. So it was cheap for me, like $1.50. It's not gonna break the bank, but when I was at the show, I saw a lot of, older retired ball players, Hall of Famers who, sign, modern cards, and they're going for a lot more than, their, I guess, original cards, and, that kind of bothers me a little bit. And then, a lot of no-name players, guys who are probably just coming up, to their sport, and, you know, with the autographs, when I was growing up, that it was something special about them, when you received an autograph from a ball player. Um, it was very kind of personal. You were growing a memory of that event. You may have been with your family, brother, sister, whoever, um, but now it's a dime a dozen. It's I I would like to say that the card companies are cheapening that, and all companies are really kind of cheapening products these days. Disney is really kind of famous for that. Like pigeons in a park, as I always used to say, Brandon. Yes. um, and one dealer was telling me too that he's kind of having a hard time with this because there's, a lot of, I guess, regular cards that he may not know that are modern cards, um, and it's he's having a hard time trying to figure out, and he told me that he's like, Listen, I have to flip over the back to make sure that it's a modern card because it's the same exact design, and it's really kinda weird. Um, I also found too that, um, there's well, for Joe Burrow, for example, um, I saw maybe a row of all of his, uh, same card. It was just a different color, and, the other thing I kinda have a problem too with, all this stuff is that it's just another, junk wax era, but it's just in a different package. So everything there seemed to be short printed purposefully, where you'd have like 1 through 100 or whatever, serial number this, serial number that, and it's it's really cheapened now too. So I kind of felt lost, to tell you the truth. Um, I don't really I kinda dabble in modern. I don't do a lot of modern. Most of it is vintage for me, so, um, I try to see what the other side is doing and, try to follow along. I can't follow this stuff. It's really difficult, and I can see why a lot of modern collectors get frustrated and, why the modern hobby would really, kinda take a nosedive, if you will, just because there's so much out there and you can lose your shirt. Splitting facts. Panini is printing everything. Yes, they are, Steve. I agree, but you know what? They also can be fun too. This is a hobby where you can have fun. Um, so, not everything has to be expensive, to get the kids in there to wanna collect, you know?
Okay. Good points. So we're obviously seeing overprinting for what's going on right now. So do you remember the 90s? I was too young. I wasn't involved too much in the hobby back then. But do you what are your thoughts from then, the 90s to now with the overprinting? Like, do you
Well,
see similarities or do you
I
like
do.
you do? Okay.
Well, let's just say I remember parts of the '90s. Um,
Okay.
so, with the '90s, you did have, obviously, overprinting and all that, and, there was a lot of stuff. Um, I do specific because I stopped collecting modern stuff in '94 and I switched to vintage. And I recently, picked this card up, not too long ago, and this was a set that I do remember being on the shelves. I obviously couldn't, afford, $10 a pack plus, for this set. Uh,
What's the player for those that can't see?
yeah, Steve, you're 100% correct. Yeah, 100%. Um, so these cards really, people were kind of angry about this, when they came out because, they were no longer for kids, they were for collectors who had the money. And, I think every generation kinda goes through this. If you wanna get into some rarities for the 1990s, you'd have to go back to, like, 1991, 1992 when, you had the Donruss Elite, and those again, I think a lot of this stuff was printed to, like, 5,000 or 10,000, and then you can go back a little bit further with the Topps Tiffany, and we do have, production numbers for those Topps Tiffany. 1987, I think there were, like, 30,000 sets produced of the Topps Tiffany, some of them as low as 5,000, but there are also, sets, Tiffany sets from, like, 1991, I believe, that they have never released the production of, and then you have another set as well, which I'll show you, and it's, this right here, and this is a, 1991, Desert Shield. This is actually one of my favorite, cards. I think, what happened to this is it's now kind of famous that the, company issued, I believe, 4,000 sets, to go over to, Kuwait, and only about 2,000 returned. The majority, at least, if not, fewer, the majority of these cards, I think, when they were over there, they couldn't bring anything back with them, so they burned them, and so, what we have is what we have. But I think, I may be doing an article, at least this year, on, that set because, honestly, when I think of this set, I think of all the veterans, that fought in that war and are having issues today. So, it's, definitely a historic set.
So that 91 Desert Shield set, the most famous card is the Chipper Jones, right?
Yep.
Yep. And then I just remember, is Ryan Sandberg in that set too? Because
He
I'm a
may
Cubs fan.
be he
Yeah,
may
I
be. I
forget.
know yeah, I know that, there are, certain cards that were not, issued. 86 Topps baseball is super rare. Um, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, um, only had 7,000 print run. So yeah, I've heard four, but I know that it's extremely not well, they're not rare. You can find these cards, but they're just you know they're not like the rest of So
I think BK Sports Cards is being sarcastic here. I don't know if you remember that situation with the Pokemon opening last year. Even more rares of vintage Pokemon with GI Joe cards. All right. Hard Jimba. I'll just call him Jim Harbaugh. 1991 Fleer baseball is the best. You could use them to repel vampires and demons from your house.
I did that with the '87 Topps baseball. Yeah, that was a set that was all over the place. Same with '88. I couldn't wait for 1988 to roll on because the '87 Topps baseball just drove me crazy. They were all over the place. I was looking forward to a new design.
What do you think is the most scarcest product from the 90s? And that's also the collector's love. I'm just thinking, is it like the PMG for Michael Jordan, those cards, or
I
like
was
what is it?
it's That's a great question. I was thinking the Metal Universe. I think some of those are pretty rare, pretty tough, especially the basketball. Um, I really kind of forgot a lot about the '90s. Uh, just it was a fun decade. Let's just put it that way, right? So, um, I stopped collecting modern stuff in 1994. So, there was also a Donruss Diamond King, which you could get, I think, 1 per box, which is a large version of the small, and I think that was in about maybe 1994, so I couldn't really grab any of those, and then I stopped collecting, during the strike. So and then there was also Topps also had, and I think this was back in the '80s, maybe the early '90s, but Topps had, at the bottom of the box, they had, cards that you had to kinda, I think, cut, and box bottoms, I think that they called them. I think Mario Lemieux's rookie is one of those from, 1985, and, I've heard that's a very expensive card. And then obviously Mario Mew and the let me see if I have it here. No, I don't. But the 1982 Topps traded Cal Ripken Jr. and those particular cards were forged quite often, and it created a situation. I think along with the Billy Ripken bleep face that where Upper Deck needed to kind of like step in and have foil packs, and then the logo and the back, the hologram. Those are all innovations to try to clamp down on the forgeries that were going on as well.
Okay, okay, yeah. I think you said earlier on about the Metal Universe cards were scarce and high in demand. I remember going to a show. I know you don't collect modern, but there's a Dennis Rodman, I think, Metal Universe card, which I really like, but the card was just ridiculously priced. It's like $1,000. I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna spend $1,000 on a Rodman card, as much as it looked really nice. So,
Yeah.
but there are some nice cards from that set. Um,
Yeah.
and like some Michael Jordan cards look really nice as well. Now, there are a few other topics I wanted to get into. So, I mean, you were emailing me about this, and it was regarding what's his name, Paul Pierce, right?
Yeah.
And it's regarding disclosures, and it was regarding a cryptocurrency, right? Was that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yep.
The reason why I bring this is that in this industry, sports card industry, I watch a lot of content. I'm sure you do as well. And it's in my opinion that some people, they do not disclose certain endorsements that they're getting. While it may not be illegal, I know on Instagram you have to disclose it if you have a certain amount of followers. And that's a topic maybe I'll get into later on. But what did you find regarding Paul Pierce and the situation, and your thoughts on
So
that?
yeah, so Paul Pierce, he has to pay back $1.4 million, and he what I guess what happened was that he was promoting Ethermax
Yeah,
tokens,
right.
and he was doing this on Twitter. So I'm not a twit. Like, I don't follow Twitter at all. So
Yeah,
um, they gave him Ethermax gave him $244,000 to promote this, but he under law he's required to disclose uh, who he got that money from and how much they paid him, um, and he never did that. So that's why the Securities and Exchange Commission went after him. He wasn't the only one either. Kim Kardashian settled back in October for $1.2 million, and it's probably a drop in the bucket with these people. But you still can't do this. You're right, and so this may actually be the foundation for how they go after the people who um, uh, I guess we're with FTX, promoting FTX. So that's going to be really interesting. Obviously, all these are crypto securities, and I don't invest in crypto at all. So my investments are more grounded, if you will.
yeah. So you mentioned FTX, but these guys, I mean, we all knew that they were promoting FTX. So I don't know if the regulators would come after them. The only way that I would see them getting in trouble is civil, in a civil lawsuit where their customers were like, "Hey, why are we promoting this garbage, crypto exchange?" I think that's where they're going to get in trouble. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I mean, there's so much about FTX that, again, we're not privy to, at least not yet, and because there is no trial yet. So I'm sure it'll all come out in trial, and well, maybe not, because I think there's a lot of political shenanigans going on there
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well, and a lot of overseas stuff. So we might not know everything. Some things might be sealed, in fact. You know.
Interesting. Do you think that the FTC, they're going to come after people on Instagram now? I mean, I don't think you use Instagram, but I do, and some of the content that I see, raises a red flag to me. I mean, I don't know if you've seen my videos, but I always talk about this one card porn channel on Instagram where I believe they may have some sort of close knit relationship with collectors holdings or golden, and I don't think a disclosure is being made. So, and they have more than 10,000 followers, where I think they need disclosures, from my understanding. So, do you think the FTC is going to start cracking down on this, or is just okay? It's more of a crypto thing where they're going to or the U.S. government's going to crack down on that. I think.
Yeah, well, they could. The Federal Trade Commission could obviously step in. I believe, is there already a lawsuit that's been filed against these guys?
Well, card porn got into a litigation regarding something else. It's regarding how they basically not pressured, but encouraged Golden to take down a posting. And now the question is whether that card was legitimate or not, whether the patch was real, from my understanding. And
So
there's a dispute regarding that, but it has nothing to deal with, card porn's, alleged close relationship with Golden or PSA.
yeah, I don't know. I think that I believe 80% of all um litigations or litigants are anything that's usually going through the court system. They don't make it to an actual court. They're usually settled out of court prior to anything that a judge is going to see. Um, so I don't know. It would be interesting to see. Again, I've heard through channels like yours that they're not entirely sure who the owners are of card porn. And sometimes if you read a legal brief, you may see defendant, X, Y, or Z. You're not going to really see the name of the person, so it can be kind of tricky if you like reading that kind of stuff, which I do. Um, it, it it can present a challenge, and I'm not sure legally if they actually have to divulge who these people are. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a lawyer, but it's going to be interesting. I think.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right. The other topic that I think you've jotted down in the comment section that I wanted to get your take on is regarding basically the Supreme Court in the 1980s, where other companies were basically allowed to compete against tops. I think the younger generation doesn't know too much about this, and one of the reasons why have you on is because you know all about the history, and I think the history is very important. So I think pre 1980, you had not too many rookie cards of individuals, and shortly after that you started to see multiple rookie cards. So what happened with the Supreme Court case in the 1980s?
Yeah, okay. So actually, you did have rookie cards. They just weren't called rookie cards because that's something that Beckett really pushed through his magazine in about 1984, 85 or so. In any event, the Federal Trade Commission, on the side of Flair back in 1962, they went after Topps because they said that Topps was a monopoly, and they actually were correct. The problem that Flair had was that they kind of got into the minutia of everything. This is why I really like this case from 1962, because it goes into so much detail on other companies. Um, and you can really kind of get lost in the weeds on this stuff. Even if you're not a lawyer, I think this is really kind of fascinating just because it shows you the business side of the hobby when it comes to businesses and not hobbyists. The problem that Flair had was that they really couldn't show um, a monopoly, and if they did, they didn't actually. It wasn't before a judge. It was before an examiner, and I do have his name. I just can't remember it, but uh, he didn't believe that it was a monopoly because we were dealing with baseball cards, and so he basically he dropped the case for Flair. They wanted to enter the baseball card market, but they were kind of stopped because Tops, right? So that kind of continued on until about 1975 when they tried again, and Tops they tried to reach out to Flair with a deal, and the deal fell through, and they went to court over it, and so that's where Judge Clarence Newcomer comes in, and he was I believe he was a retired judge at that point, or he was just about to retire, and he took up the case, and it lasted from 1975 to 1980. And I think part of this has to do with Marvin Miller as well, who is the yeah, he was the player rep, I guess, if you will, or the players union representative, and when he started the players union in about 1966 or so, you had other unions prior to this, but all of them really kind of failed. They were all by players. Bob Feller, I think, was one of the first. Robin Roberts, Ted Kaczewski. Um, in any event, uh, Judge Clarence Newcomer here, he was a card collector back in the 1930s and 1940s, so he at least understood. And he's really one of the first judges that I'm aware of, and what I've seen to actually dive headfirst into this. And I thought he did a really, really great job of sifting through all the dirt and to get to the actual problem. And um, it's a really fascinating case. Flair was able to uh, go on and really produce cards in about 1981 or so, but they had months to prepare. That was it. They also couldn't sell their cards with chewing gum, and that's the difference. But those products they weren't that good in 1981. So it's a really fascinating case, and actually I wrote quite extensively about it. You can see it on my website.
So we could say that the supply of all these cards, it changed right around the 1980s because of all of this, right? You would say that?
Actually, I'd say back in, you could say probably back in like 1960 or so. There
1960.
are, yeah, there are certain accounts from the late 50s and 1960s where Topps is saying to the press how many cards that they've produced, and it was in the millions. Um, eh, I don't know if I really believe all that. It could be just them hyping up their product. Again, um, we don't have actual statistics for production. The thank you. If you read the 1962 Federal Trade Commission report, um, first off, try not to fall asleep unless that's your goal. Um, if you do read it, you're going to see that they go back to the 1930s and 1940s with Gowdy, and they go through how many cards that Gowdy sold. And I'm I think what you have to do if you're really good at math, which I am not, is that you have to go through all the financial data to figure out how many cards that these companies produced, and if uh, the Gaudy, for example, if they're issuing one card per pack, and that pack is a penny, and they have sales of $1 million in 1933, then you can kind of do the math there. But again, you're looking at 90 years now, and what's the survival rate, of these cards? There's also another case too that I recently wrote about with Johnny Mize, and the first instance where I found out about this case was through that 1962 Federal Trade Commission report, and Johnny Mize is the first player other than Honus Wagner. In fact, Honus Wagner didn't go to court over this, but Johnny Mize did. And what Johnny Mize had said back in 1941 was that um, his likeness was being used without his permission, and he sued the company, which is double, or the cards were double play. He sued that company, Gum Products Inc., and he took it to court, and it reached court in 1942. The problem I had was that I couldn't find any of the documentation for this. Apparently, it doesn't exist anymore, which I thought would be really kind of a historic thing. And so it's it's the first case of its kind that I'm aware of, and he did lose his case again because uh, the judge in the case, the first judge, said that you can have a continuance. We'll stop production of your card, and then we'll come back to this. And that was again in leading up to 1942. A year later, he was traded and he went into the military. But the judge who ruled against Johnny Mize said that he was an entertainer and he really had no right to his likeness. So let me vintage won't go back, and without true print runs revealed, we can just guess at ultra modern. Okay, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
you have to guess about some of the true print runs of some of this stuff.
So Collector's Dream says 1963 Fleer made cards challenging tops at the time.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. They were stopped. I think partway through, and so I think I want to say there's 66 cards in that set. It's a fascinating set too.
Interesting, interesting. So now we have Fanatics, and Panini is most likely going to go in the Fanatics umbrella. So do you see the similar thing happening way back when, where okay, you had Tops basically running the show, and then okay, then you had Fleer and Dunross, but then now it's just going to be under one, big corporation. So is it just problematic on your end to
Yeah,
see
I,
all of this?
I think so. It looks like, I mean, first off, we went through this with the American Tobacco Company in 1909 through 1912, 1913, right? So, it was brand new back then when our T206 were coming out. Something like, let me show you something like this, right? So, and I think I've explained a little bit about this to you in the past and to your viewers. Um, that case kind of was the first one to deal with monopolies, and the American Tobacco Company had a monopoly on sports cards, and then you see another monopoly with tops again, and so now we really could be facing another monopoly, well, modern, right? So, um, it's gonna. I think it could hurt the consumer. It could hurt the hobby, because usually what happens in a monopoly is that companies get sloppy, they get lazy. We see this with a lot of 1970s top sets. Um, and it stifles innovation. And again, it can hurt the secondary market. It can hurt consumers. I don't see it being very good, and I don't see it being good for other companies that want to get into the game. Especially if you are a company that wants to have a license with one of these, like uh, football or basketball or hockey. Now you have licenses, uh, deals with just one company, and you know, I could probably see where the Federal Trade Commission would want to get in on this and see what's going on. There are certain monopolies that they'll look at and they'll say, if we break up this monopoly, it's going to cause a lot more chaos, uh, and it wouldn't be good. So, some monopolies you just can't break up, um, and then some you can. And it all depends. Again, the American Tobacco Company, that the look into that one, it was from 1907. Actually, in fact, further back, you can go back to like 1902, and then they officially opened up that case in 1907. The problem here, too, is that you and I and your viewers might know what's going on with this company, but that doesn't mean that the court will. at all, or the Federal Trade Commission. You have to have people in these agencies that are knowledgeable. And the one thing that I found through reading about the American Tobacco Company is that there was a time where the Supreme Court, especially the people on it, the justices, their thinking was still in the 19th century, and it was really kind of stuck there, where they there was so much innovation that was going on that they didn't understand it, and they didn't understand how to implement it. And it was another problem too that they had was the right of privacy. And that's again what Johnny Mize was talking about, or trying to get the judge to understand in his case. And the judge didn't understand that. So, again, uh, you could be right, and the judge or the jury might not understand your case.
Interesting, interesting. So I see this comment about Upper Deck. This caught my eye. Vintage card collector. Upper Deck has a monopoly in hockey, and no one talks about that. And I'm just thinking, first of all, with Upper Deck, I think Upper Deck will still be independent for now. And I don't think Fanatics can buy them out. So, with that in mind, do you think that they have a monopoly on hockey, or is it, I mean, hockey isn't that big of a market. So that's why I'm really not up in arms regarding that.
Hockey is it's a fascinating sport, and it has a certain collector group that you're not going to find anywhere else. Um, I don't know if they have the license for how long with hockey, so I'd have to look into that. Um, again, as I say, monopolies, they're not good for business. They're not good for people, um, and they stifle innovation. And so, I would have to look at Upper Deck's monopoly if they have one in hockey. And there was another case in, I believe, 2005 that really did affect the companies issuing cards. And I haven't read this. I haven't read this report in a long time, but I know that certain companies like Flair and Tops were greatly affected. Well, at least they should have been. And you're looking at almost 20 years later, and things are not that different, I think.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. So going back to Fanatics, so there have been rumblings that Fanatics is buying up the printers associated with, or that Panini uses, or something like that, and the rights to use that. And so, if you have that in mind, and that's true, Panini's hands are tied behind their backs. And I'm just thinking, okay, so if when Fanatics does eventually buy Panini, I think what could be not scary for the hobby, what I wouldn't like is if Fanatics starts doing that type of behavior with Upper Deck and, the printing presses that they use. And then Upper Deck may have their hands tied behind their back. So if I see, Fanatics doing what they've been doing, yeah, Ruben is a very skilled CEO. There's no doubt about that. But like you said earlier, it does make me a bit uncomfortable that they could control this whole market. And okay, if they get Panini, fine. But then if they go after Upper Deck, I think that's troublesome, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, he may have to watch out for overprinting. People, I mean, again, we saw this in the 1970s, 1980s, with back in 1974, there was new printing technology that made it easier to print cards. You didn't have series anymore after 1974 for the most part. I think Upper Deck did have, I believe, Series 1 and Series 2 when they released their 89 and 90, 91, 92 sets. If all these companies are doing their printing in-house, I'm not entirely familiar about how they're printing a lot of this stuff. I am, again, I'm kind of shocked by some of these cards, how they're actually printing them. I'd love to find out, because it can't be cheap to print this stuff. Again, we just saw a pretty major mistake on the part of one company where they put a Babe Ruth card and or Babe Ruth autograph on a George Brett card and vice versa, right? It used to be that the companies were contracting out to printers, and the printer would print their card. And I think in about 1982 or 85 or so, the mid 80s, is when Topps started to print their own cards. And it, again, that creates a problem as well, because that's how, for the most part, I think that's how you get a junk wax era.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I saw this one interesting comment. Brendan Ryan, they will just outsource to China at about a penny a card cost, and that will most likely be the new standard. So I'm just thinking, do they print in the US or is it outside the US? Is it in maybe a Southeast Asian country, or do
I
you
don't.
you still you don't know?
I think they print these cards in the United States. I I can't see them printing cards outside. I know Topps used to. Well, okay, so way back in the day, back in the 1950s, late 50s, and definitely in the 1960s, Topps used to give other countries their, I guess, licensing deals to print cards with. They look a lot like, if you're going for cricket or soccer, the design looks like Tops, right? But it's gonna have like a cricket player or something like that. So um, they will. A lot of these companies like Tops, or maybe Panini, will have agreements with other countries. So yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right, Dave. So yeah, they'll have agreements with them, and then uh, in some cases they'll print the cards here and ship them. So I believe that the Venezuelan Tops cards were printed here and shipped down to Venezuela.
Okay, that's interesting. Collector's Dream says some Topps Tiffany sets were printed in Ireland. That I didn't know of. That's
I
interesting.
Yeah, so that's awesome, because, and thanks for reminding me about that. Tops did have a plant in Ireland, and I think it was, I was gonna actually write about this. I think they started it in about 1972, 1973, and I think they closed their doors in 2018. But I find it really fascinating that that Tops actually did that.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, okay, Fanatics, they're all about margins. They're going to have an IPO most likely. So it's a publicly traded company soon. So if they wanted to cut costs, I mean, why wouldn't they just go overseas? I mean, from quality control point of view, I wouldn't do that because that could end up hurting the brand. But, if you're looking at a big company, right, and they obviously care about margins and it's not, the top of the line brand and they're just trying to mass produce something, I wouldn't be surprised if they just do it overseas, to be honest. But You know,
There's a
it,
lot of quality control issues going on now with modern stuff, you know?
so I'm just wondering, is that done overseas? That's the thing.
It could be worse overseas. I mean, thank you so much, Brett. I really appreciate that.
So this is what Dave says. Dave says that Panini does not own any machines in the U.S. Okay, because it's a what Italian-based company.
Yeah, that's an
So
old company too. That goes back to at least 1954. And I know they used to have stickers back in the 80s of rock and rollers that I used to listen to. So
yeah,
um, I do kind of like them.
yeah. The comment section seems to know a lot about this, which is quite
Yeah, this
interesting.
is great. This is
Yeah,
great.
that's what I like about these live streams rather than recording them. Mike says,
Yeah,
I've seen some new Tops product printed in Mexico. Yeah, that I didn't know of as well.
there's the so in 1977, Topps printed cards for Mexico football, which I think is really interesting. And thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so those are really fascinating cards. I don't have any in my collection, but maybe someday. And the other thing too is, like say with the Venezuelan tops, I think those are printed in cloth, just because of the humidity, right? So some of these cards are going to be printed a little bit differently depending on the temperature and the other standards, right? So um, and then there's that.
Okay. Brett says 2020 Tops F1 cards were printed in Italy and had a lot of edge issues, especially on the Sapphire. Okay.
Okay. So I got a question about this. Are there going to be a lot of sets from printed from like say 2020 through 2022 that are going to be more on the rarer side because of all the issues that we're having today with like certain you can't find certain foods or certain products. I'm curious to see what's going to happen to a lot of these companies that are having all these issues getting their products to customers, supply chain issues, if you will.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question because I don't know if you remember that huge I was talking about this a lot. It was like regarding Herbert, right? Remember, they're using Kurt's card care, and I was vehemently against that. And a lot of people still were saying that, hey, look, it's Panini that's the problem. It's not people using Kurt's card care. And that card that was used to get what I think a BGS 9, I don't remember it up the top of my head. And yeah, that card has gone down in value, but there's a lot of issues with the quality control. There's no doubt about that. So I'm just there's not going to be that many PSA 10s for
Right.
the
Right.
scarcer cards. So I think that's going to help out those that are collectors or those that are speculating. But once again, there's still a lot of these Herbert rookie cards, for instance. So, but on the scarcer side, you could find a situation where it could help out the collector as long as it's in the highest grade and in pristine condition.
My my fear is, and again, I saw this at the show, and I've seen it at a couple of shows. My fear is for the modern collectors, because you have, like, say, Justin Herbert. Um, you have a player who has just a multitude of rookie cards, and again, kind of like getting back to this gentleman right here. He only has two rookie cards. He's got this, and then he's got a disc, and uh,
Wait, what's his
how
second rookie card?
it's a disc.
Oh,
It's like a MPM or something like that. It's a disc from 1981
okay.
that he's on. It's very rare too. I prefer really kind of just having one, maybe two or three rookie cards. Um, but there's so many rookie cards of these players that how can you maybe it's just me, but how do you know which one to collect, which one to keep, hold, buy or sell? It's This is why I'm a vintage guy, because it's to me vintage is a lot easier than modern, and I hate to say it like that, but I was very overwhelmed when I went to this show.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense about that. And I'm just thinking in the long run, like, how will people determine, like you're saying, which rookie card to collect or which rookie card to invest in? Tom Brady has what, over 50 rookie cards? And that's what, over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So now today, how many rookie cards does Herbert have? He has a ton. And Herbert's not the top QB of the class. I mean, how many rookie cards does Joe Burrow have? You bought it like $1 card, but I'm just thinking like that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that if you go back to, say, the 1980s or maybe early 90s, and see what kids and adults were collecting then, the values associated with those cards, they're not the values, they're not the same values that those specific cards are today. They're, in most cases, they have gone down in value. I can remember, in fact, I spoke about this in one of my videos about the 1986 Don Russ, Jose Canseco. Um, and I had got that card at for my birthday in 1986. I promptly lost it. Um, I went to go back and grab another one, almost 30 years later. And at the time when that card was kind of new in 1986, 87, I think that card was going for about $90. And so, nobody's paying $90 for a 1986 Donruss Jose Canseco. I think I paid under $20 for that card autographed. But, again, that card brings me back specific memories, and it's one of the reasons why I collect the cards of my youth, which is the 1980s. They were, again, sets that were like maybe 120 to maybe $350 or $400 when I was a kid, like the 1984 Don Russ. And you can get these cards vastly cheaper. My point being is that what happens 20 to 30 years from now with the cards that we're all collecting, the modern cards, right? I think it's generational. Those cards that you guys are collecting and me sometimes today, the modern stuff, um, they may hold some value depending on the person who is collecting, because it's a part of their memory. But for my generation, I'm Gen X. Uh, oh, they again they're not gonna hold the same, value, I guess, or the same memories, just as, like, the stuff that my father was collecting in the 1950s. I don't know where value is gonna be for these cards 20, 30, 40 years from now. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to these vintage cards, I'm not sure how many of these younger guys though. I mean, I would like to hear your opinion. A lot of these younger guys, they're not into baseball cards. A lot of the old cards that people collect back in the day were baseball, right? And now the
Yeah.
older generation, okay, yeah, they're baseball fans, but the younger generation, they don't like baseball. They think it's boring. So I just wonder how that's going to turn out with this new generation. They're more into football, they're more into basketball, those sports. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to go into some of these vintage baseball cards, but I think they're just gonna keep on flooding money into modern. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, so with baseball, I mainly collect baseball, but again, I'm doing it for different reasons. I don't flip. My reasons for collecting vintage to begin with it is another way for me to be educated. I use them as a tool for education, um, but for the most part, uh, baseball has been seen as a very boring sport going back to the 1890s. You have reports, at least in the 1920s and 1930s and 40s, where they're trying to speed up the game. And a lot of people are saying, like, these games used to be an hour and a half. Now they're 2 hours, 3 hours. And I don't, and again, I'm not smart enough to try to figure this one out, where how do you, speed up a game? The other thing too is that, we are literally a push button generation. We don't have the attention spans that we once did, and I think a lot of that has to do with, the internet. Everybody wants something right now, immediately. And that's one of the reasons I think why baseball is becoming kind of unpopular. Now, the funny thing is that baseball was really not a very popular sport back in the 1950s either, when we think it was a golden generation because Mickey Mantle and Ted Williams played, and other really famous ball players that now we idolize. Um, but yeah, and then the other thing too is, if you ever read any articles from the players who played in the dead ball era, um, those guys are writing articles or they're being interviewed in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and they're all saying, back in my day, these ball players they wouldn't be able to play in the dead ball era, and they're talking about guys like Babe Ruth being too fat, and it's just kind of funny how they viewed ball players from their era versus ball players of the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's completely different. Um, and so I I I don't know like how to say this, but um, the the vintage football cards of the 1940s and 1950s and 1960s, those cards are ridiculously cheap. Um, Football and post-war football was becoming very, very popular sport. It was very difficult for football to really become a national sport that we all see it today. Um, but if history has anything to teach us, we can look at the 1950s vintage football and see how cheap it is today, and then kind of uh, it may give us a clue of where football is headed. Now, I'm not really particularly a fan of what I'm seeing with the players in the NFL. A lot of people are saying that the NFL stands for the National Felons League. Um, and football does have to clean up its act on that one, for sure. And then the political side of it too. You know, uh, we watch sports to get away from politics, and we collect sports cards to get away from this stuff. Just our average everyday person. When I come home, and the first thing I wanna do is kind of dive into my sports card collection and kinda relax and chill out and just kind of, like, study this stuff. I don't wanna think about anything else for a while. That's that.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that a lot of sports are way more political than what they used to be. So, just as a devil's advocate response,
Oh, I agree with that. I agree with that, and there's a lot of politics behind the field, if you will, behind
oh yeah,
closed doors, especially, when it comes to, like, Jackie Robinson or like I said, Johnny Mize. It's there's for sports and baseball in particular, um, you can see, baseball as a mirror to America in any given era, and baseball is really a sport that is being played on 3 different fields: on the field, in the courtroom, and behind the scenes. It's always really kind of been that way.
Oh yeah, for sure. Baseball is one shady sport out there. Brendan says, guess what country manufactures slabs for PSA? I don't know that. Do you know that?
I'd love to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah. Brendan, if you're still in the chat, let us know. I'll
I
check the comments.
is it China?
I would not be surprised at that.
Mexico?
I have no idea. Let's see if you responded to that. Uh, Someone says Korea, but I don't know about that. Oh, Brendan Ryan says China. That I didn't know, to be
Okay.
honest.
Yeah, that's
But I mean, like, where'd you get the cheapest material to make it? You
yeah.
have to go overseas. I mean, if you think about it, some of the cards that they have, it costs $15, right, to get it graded, and you have to pay shipping. So you can't make that in the US if you're doing it for $15. That's
You'd
what
have
I'm
to
thinking. Yeah, you have to get it from elsewhere if you're doing it in scale. Even if you're like buying in bulk, but still, that's what makes sense. But
I would say if they're not making out of drywall, right? I mean, you'd probably be okay, but I mean the the, um, the manufacturer itself, I mean, we had a problem with a lot of the PVC plastics that were being used in the hobby back in the mid 1980s. It was destroying the cards. And it took them a while to figure out the correct formula on that. So, stuff like this. I mean, this company has been around since 1991. It's the Card Saver, and I think they're pretty good.
is it what's it, cardboard gold or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're a pretty good company. I
Yeah.
think they're
Yeah.
they're not they're privately owned.
Yeah. Yeah. They get their material from, I don't know if it's China or is it Taiwan? I don't remember. It's from Southeast Asia. I know
So
they get like tubs of material. I mean, we used to buy from them and resell some of their products.
some of it
They're
can be a little
insane.
on the expensive side, to tell you the truth. Again, the funny thing too is I actually, let me see if I have something here. I do. Okay, so I I've been told not to do this, but I have a lot of my cards in screw downs because I'm old school and maybe I'm kind of dumb. But I've been told that a lot of these cards that are in screw downs, it will misshape the card if you go to send it into PSA. They might give you an authentic grade because the card, there's really maybe nothing wrong with the card. It hasn't been screwed with, except for the screw down has kind of warped the card. Hopefully, the generations that come after me and sell my cards won't have any problems. But
So the thing with screw downs, though, I think PSA. I don't think they unscrew it. I think you have to unscrew the card yourself. But I
yeah,
could be wrong. Yeah, but
I've never sent in a card to any grading company.
oh wow,
I'm not the world's biggest fan of grading companies, as you know.
oh wow, you're old school.
Yeah, yeah,
You're like a hardcore collector.
yeah.
That's interesting.
I remember when, PSA first started and dealers didn't know how to, basically treat graded cards. Collectors were really wary of them too because, it came down to, why would you spend, more money for this card, and, how do you price it? Yes, Carlos, 100%, 100%. Um, there was a scandal in 1986 with what I think turned out to be Collector's Universe, with the coin industry, and it was pretty bad from everything I've read. And then they had to go somewhere, so they went to the baseball card industry, if you will, and started grading. But it took a long time for collectors and dealers to A, try to figure this stuff out, and then B, trust the company. And PSA, they their first car that they graded was the Gretzky McNow Wagner, and that ended up being trimmed at least twice. And there's a book, The Card. I think Terry McAuliffe or something like that. Anyway, that actually is a very good book, and you guys, uh, thank you, and I appreciate that. The Card is a really good take on what happened to Bill Mastro, Doug Allen, and the Gretzky McNow Wagner. And McNow actually he went to jail for fraud himself. Um, yeah, there's a lot of people, patches that don't trust PSA just because of that incident. Um, and it's a really fascinating story. The thing that I wish that the writers would do was go back to that book and tell the readers what happened afterwards, because the two gentlemen, Mastro, I think he had 20 months in jail, and Doug Allen actually spent more time in prison. Because they felt that his involvement was actually worse. And there was something also with the case, and I think you had actually kind of said this in one of your videos about the list of people as well. That I thought that was really interesting, um, and so I'd love to get your take on it too. But um, there was a case where a lawyer had sent in his father's collection to Bill Mastro, and Bill Mastro stole his father's collection and put it up for auction. And the lawyer wrote a letter to the judge. I think his name was Gutierrez, and he said that I have proof that these are my father's cards. And what he did was, for every card that he sent in, he photographed them first. And as you guys know, that every card has a particular thing about it. It could be like a dent, maybe a little bit of a crease, the edge wear, the corners, and all this matched up with the photos in the auction, and that's how Gutierrez ended up tacking on, I think, more time or using that as another appendum, if you will, to that case, which I thought was really fascinating. And again, the guy is a lawyer too that he stole from. So it's really it's a very fascinating case. And then all the guys and girls that were on that list of either victims or show bidders. So you do have some really famous people who were show bidders, and then you have some very famous people who were, um, I guess, victims. Penny Marshall, the director, was one of the victims of that. She's now passed away. She was, I think, the director of League of Their Own. And then you also have another case too, where there was a guy who basically stole an entire collection of photos of George Burke and George Brace, and that collection that's actually something that you guys can see on American Greed. I think it was the Rogers case, and I think he's still in jail, but, that's an amazing thing. That entire collection, the Brace collection, it's in pieces, and they're never gonna piece it back together, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There's some things I didn't even know about, but you were asking me during that about just my own thoughts about the shill bid list. Is that what you were asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I find interesting going through the list, I was sent this about a year ago, and I discussed this a little bit with Sports Card Radio when I had them on my live stream. But I was shocked when I went through the documents that, okay, Ken Golden had something, or that he was, I think, selling, if I remember correctly. And the one of the alleged shill bidders, I think his name is like Abramitz or something like that, Daryl something. I have to look at the name,
Okay.
right? And the names are are always the same for that. And then there's the guy from SGC. There's what, Foreman, the managing director, I believe, if he's still there. And I think it was his brother that was allegedly shill bidding for the card that was consigned. So it's just weird that uh, like these people that are very high up in the industry, right? Golden, whether it was done deliberately or not, I think people have their own opinions on that. And
Right.
then this SGC guy, right? It's just bizarre. And then Ryan from Sports Card Radio, he told me that what apparently happened was there was a lot of documentation that was missing. So I just imagine what else was going on. We just have a glimpse of what went on.
That documentation that's missing, how do they know that?
I mean, Ryan follows the hobby very closely, so I'll have to maybe ask him maybe next time around.
Yeah,
How did he know?
yeah, see if, because if it's documentation that was presented through court, I could see where it could, it could go missing. And usually that's not through like any kind of you know, legitimate, it was done on purpose or whatever. As I said before, with the Johnny Myers case from 1941, I couldn't find any um, anything on that through the court system. It doesn't mean that somebody took the uh, the stenographer's notes or anything like that, or anything that was added to the court, presented in court. It just means that you have cases where things go missing, boxes go missing, evidence goes missing all the time, and so it might not be nefarious. It's just that at the time when Bill Mastro was doing all this stuff, they just had so much documentation out there that um, again, things go missing, even afterwards. And, um, I think a lot of the stuff is archived as well. So, I'd love to kind of like know if what this stuff was, like what was, the evidence, how much evidence there was, where it is now, if it's in storage somewhere.
Oh yeah, I would like to know like what happened, but the FBI was still able to like piece together, this evidence. But the thing is, the only people that went to jail, they were what, Doug Allen and Mastro, right?
Mm. Yep.
And then none of the other people that were shill bidding, like nothing happened to them.
Right, 'cause, those 2, it was so egregious. It was so egregious what they did that,
Yeah.
it affected a lot of people. It's I think it's kind of a rare thing. I don't know too many, collectors out there or dealers that end up going to jail, let alone their cases ending up in court and going through a courtroom, a judge. Um, a lot of these cases, I think, end up getting thrown out because you have to have standing, whenever you, present a case like that to the judge, and then he'll decide whether or not it has standing to go forward. And again, like I said before, is that you need the judge and the jury to understand exactly what's going on, and they might say, all this over a baseball card. You know, and I think so the All Star Cafe Wagner that belonged to Charlie Sheen, that was stolen too, if you remember that case. I think those guys, I don't think they went to jail. I don't, and I I also remember uh uh what's his name? Another guy named Al Rosen. Al Rosen received stolen goods, which was, I think, the All Star Cafe Wagner, and he tried to buy it, I think, for $18,000. Now he said that he didn't know. He was interviewed by the FBI. I think I think now that he's dead, he can't sue me, so I'm kind of free here. Again, I knew Al Rosen for a long time, and he always kind of threatened to sue me if I ever talked about anything. Um, he I think had received stolen goods on a few occasions, and I think this is one of them. Um, and that uh, I've never been interviewed by the FBI on anything, so I know that he's been interviewed a few times on this stuff, so he must have known that he was dealing in stolen goods, especially if he was willing to pay $18,000 for a T206 Wagner. Um, again, did he not? Again, he didn't ask where this stuff came from, and they gave him like a bogus argument where it was my grandfather's card up in the attic. How many times have you heard that one before?
Yep.
Ke-
Interesting. Interesting.
Kevin Keating. I know the name. He goes back quite far. Um,
Yeah, I don't know too much about this, to be honest.
yeah, I mean that seems like a lot of high end collectors and dealers have ins with the grading companies that you and I probably would not, just because of who they are and their connections to. And that's nothing new. You have again our hobby pioneers Jefferson Burdick and John D. Wagner and Lionel Carter. Those guys, they were all connected to one another, and basically, they could get like any card they wanted to. You know.
Right. Last thing I wanted to end it on is, okay, we've seen obviously a huge run up during the pandemic. It slowed down what the last year and a half. Now, if we know there was a ridiculous amount of fraud that was going on during the Mastro situation, and then you covered it earlier on with other individuals like Rosen, and then before, how PSA started. What do you think went on during the pandemic? I know it's all speculation, but just, thinking out loud. What
Well,
would you I know you're yeah, I know you're careful in what you say, so
I
if you
I
don't wanna
am. I Yes. I I usually don't report on things unless I have multiple sources.
just yeah.
Um, well, I'll tell you this. It The pandemic is a absolutely fantastic time. It's fascinating. It's fantastic. I don't mean that in a good way either. Um, this is a time in American history that we're gonna tell our grandkids about, and our grandkids are gonna look at us like, "Were you guys nuts?" um, it is something that I think you have when the pandemic started. You didn't have a whole lot to do because a lot of people were at home or lost their jobs. Um, and obviously see a spike in the hobby. We've never seen this in the hobby before. Not even during World War II, when the hobby really skyrocketed, and it, it it is something I don't think we're ever going to see again. So who knows exactly what went on during this time. Um, Thank you so much, Bob Boozle. I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why I have you on. It's like the breadth of your knowledge is fascinating.
oh man,
And,
it's all up rattling up here, you know.
yeah.
Um, um, I I can only speculate that, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now, we will get, the truth on a lot of this stuff, and, um, I'm not gonna get into any of the political stuff here, because there is a lot to it, even with sports, going from, like, 2020 to 2021, 2022. Um, I I think that, you had a lot of government checks, a lot of money, and this is what happens when you print overprint money and give it to people. Obviously, if your goal is to try to up not upend the economy, but try to lift it up, that's obviously the wrong thing to do because the more money you print, the lower the dollar values. And we've seen this. And we didn't even touch on the Great Depression or the 16th Amendment or
Oh
anything
yeah,
like
we have so many topics next
that.
time.
But yeah, but this happened again. If you go back to real quickly, if you go back to the Great Depression in 1934, what they did was they took out all the gold certificates from circulation. They took out everything and they placed it back in circulation that where the gold certificates were no longer a redeemable. Um, and so, we also have, some, I guess, strange, taxes, coming up too, or a thought that, there's gonna be a flat tax, and then, that's gonna be interesting. I don't think that that could be implemented, but again, uh, what I'm kinda curious is if A, they did actually ever, implement a flat tax, what would that do to the hobby? To people going to shows. Y you know, eh, I have no idea, and that we're kind of, going into new territory with all of this stuff with the pandemic, and then, again, they've tried to, see what would happen with a flat tax going back to 1974. So, it's been a dream of a lot of people, and again, um, who knows if it could be implemented or if it would even help certain individuals or hurt certain individuals depending on their income status or what they purchase. A lot of card purchases are not done through the internet. Um, and again, Raul, this is really kind of an interesting thing because um, we have grading companies, and we go through to see how much these cards have gone for, but it only represents a small portion of the cards themselves. Just the grading companies, you may see like a million cards are graded this year or 100,000 last month or whatever, but that's a very small representation of all the cards out there. So, again, I did see a comment by Patches where he said that they were reslabbing cards for other companies. So, again, that really kind of screws with the population reports, and I kinda tend to use population reports, as maybe a guide only as I do with, price guides. Price guides in my day, I hate to say it like that, price guides in my day, were only meant, as a guide, and then if you went to a show or anything, you could kind of just toss them aside because they didn't really mean a whole lot. They were just a starting point to negotiations, and so I unless the card itself is numbered, right? I don't think that, we really have a good estimation of, what is out there, even graded. So,
Yeah, you have many good points, and I'm sure the next time around, we're definitely going to talk a little more about economics. I mean, you just brought up some interesting points a few minutes ago. Now, before I let you go, Ryan, where can people follow you?
History Through Cards Shortcut, which is my YouTube channel, or historythroughcards.com, which you can read any of my articles and fall asleep to. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on, Ryan. We
Thank
really
you. I
enjoyed
really
you.
appreciate it.